from the I-24 News Studios in Times Square in New York. This is Clear Cut with Michelle McCory.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And we begin with a stunning statement from the UN Secretary General today. Antonio Guterres saying that the Cold War is back with a vengeance. The strong language after Russia accused the United Kingdom of staging last weekend's chemical attack in Syria. That claim was quickly dismissed by the UK and its allies. France, the US and the UK say that they have proof there was a chemical attack. And it comes as the US continues to mount diplomatic pressure on Syria and its benefactor and protector, Russia.
It is Russia alone that had agreed to be the guarantor of the removal of all chemical weapons in Syria. If Russia had lived up to its commitment, there would be no chemical weapons in Syria, and we would not be here today.
We have coverage from the United Nations, Washington, D.C. and London tonight with our senior diplomatic correspondent, Nina Larson, our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv, and our UK and Europe correspondent, Jonathan Sacerdoti. Nina, let's start with you. Tell us about this claim from the Russians. Do they have any evidence to back up that the UK is behind this?
Well, they're claiming that they do, Michelle, but I don't think anyone's going to assess that it has any credibility whatsoever. It was quite a bizarre meeting today. Russia called it. It was meant to be Russia putting its case on why the US, UK and France shouldn't strike Syrian targets, but instead it really turned into be why they should, and the other powers making that case. Nikki Haley, very tough, obviously, on her Russian counterpart. She said, look, how can you actually say this to me with a straight face? And you can imagine the reaction of the United Kingdom to this. They said that Russia was blatantly lying. It's quite extraordinary.
Absolutely. Let's get more on that reaction from the UK. Jonathan, tensions are already running high between Moscow and London. So what was the response in the UK to this outlandish accusation?
Michelle, as potential acts of war are still being planned, the war of words is already well underway. Britain's ambassador to the UN condemned the Russian theory that the UK had somehow engineered a fake chemical weapons attack in Syria as a blatant lie, describing it as the worst piece of fake news they'd yet seen from the Russian propaganda machine. So strong words there. And the UK Foreign Office said that the accusations were ludicrous and pointed to the fact that Russia has actually used its UN Security Council veto 6 times since February 2017 to shield the Assad regime from scrutiny for its use of chemical weapons.
And Nina, that war of words is what prompted the comment from the United Nations Secretary General saying that the Cold War is back with a vengeance. That is quite a stunning statement.
It was, Michelle. I was quite surprised at him being that explicit. Of course, it's his job to really put everybody in order. It's his job to try and maintain some kind of peace and security in the world, and that's what the Security Council is meant to do. But it's absolutely split at the moment. They're completely, I wouldn't even say split down the middle. It's just unbelievable what we saw today. But Russia's been using this kind of narrative again and again and again. They've used their veto power over anything to do with Syria and chemical weapons in particular over and over again. And they seem to be taking a leap where they're tying in whatever happened in Syria to whatever they're accused of doing in the UK. Again, as Jonathan said, it's part of a propaganda campaign, it seems.
Right. Dan, in Washington, the U.S. State Department saying today that they have proof that Syria's government was behind this chemical attack. Tell us about that.
That is something new indeed, Michelle. The spokeswoman at the State Department, Heather Nauert, said that the United States has a very high level of confidence that Syria's government was behind the chemical attack on civilians. It's significant, by the way, to say the Syrian government, not just the military, not some rogue part of the Syrian regime, but the Syrian government. It suggests that when the United States and its allies, perhaps Britain and France, joining in strikes against Syria, when they they choose targets, they could be trying to hit the Syrian government. Of course, we don't know. Officials here in Washington are holding all the plans close to their chests, you might say. But I will note that when it comes to the Cold War reference, on Wednesday of this week, President Trump tweeted that our relationship with Russia is worse than it has ever been, including the Cold War. So that is the frosty message coming from here in Washington, Michelle.
Dan, is the White House saying anything more about a decision on that possible strike?
Just that consultations continue. As a matter of fact, last we heard from administration officials, no final decision has been made. The president's been in touch, has been advised by officials, including Defense Secretary James Mattis. Also, there is John Bolton, right? He's the national security advisor at the White House. Just as of this past Monday, he's thought of as generally militant, stands up for a strong United States response to any challenges in the world. That's what we expect from President Trump. But again, we don't know when. Keep in mind, international inspectors are believed to be at the scene of the attack, probably tomorrow, Saturday. That could delay an attack,
right.
But I'll only say could. Michelle?
Right. That would seem logical that they wouldn't strike whilst UN inspectors are there. Nina, tell us more about these chemical weapons inspectors that are expected to arrive in Syria tomorrow and be there over the weekend at least.
Yeah, they're actually there today, Michelle. They'll be at the site of the attack tomorrow, but so we don't know exactly what kind of access they'll have. Will they be able to take samples? This is the OPCW, the watchdog for this kind of thing, but we've already heard in advance from James Mattis, actually, Secretary of Defense, that they won't be able to pin blame. They can only really assess that a certain kind of chemical attack occurred, and that's what the UK, France and the US have already assessed. So what we're seeing here really is international diplomacy going before international military engagement, trying to get all their ducks in a row, trying to prove as well as they can before they go into any kind of military confrontation there.
Right. Back over to you, Jonathan, in London. The UK has indicated that it is willing to participate in a multilateral strike. What's the latest on that?
Well, British Prime Minister Theresa May held a special cabinet meeting on Thursday in which she sought support to join tripartite military action against the Syrian regime. That meeting resulted in agreement that Britain should act against Syria. The debate here in Britain, though, has been over whether or not Theresa May now needs to seek the approval of Parliament to join the military action, when her predecessor, David Cameron, lost a vote to do just that in 2013. If the strike comes before Monday, she can avoid that, as Parliament is still on recess for Easter, though for such a measure it could be, and really should be, some say, recalled. So far, though, it looks like she might well act without that parliamentary vote, and she'll inform MPs of such a strike if it happens, in the same way that Cameron did when British jihadis were killed in Syria with drone strikes back in 2015.
All right. Jonathan Sacerdoti live for us in London. Thank you. Nina Lawson and Dan Raviv, thank you all.